What's going on, guys? My name is Tyler, and this is Everyday EDC. Today, I am going to talk about, let's talk about the season. My wife and I carved some pumpkins about 5 nights ago, the night before Halloween. No, 4 nights ago. We were a little behind the curve. Obviously, my son showed very little to no interest at the age of 2.5. And we started and we ended up just carving as much as we could in a night without getting bored and sore. So we ended up carving 3 pumpkins each that night. Yes, including cleaning them out and everything. And it was it was interesting. And once you get into a groove, you kind of get going, and the right tool for the job definitely helps. So today, I am going to talk about the knives that we use to carve pumpkins, what performed well, what I used it for. There was a couple knives that I expected to do very well that ended up not doing so hot. All right, without further ado, this is my Protech SG. I got this in a trade with Johnny. He's a guy that watches the channel. Thank you very much, Johnny, for this trade. I've been carrying this a little bit more, and what I'm trying to do lately is like force myself to carry a couple knives that are in that wishy-washy area for me, as far as like, I reach for it and then I end up, it always gets beat out by something else. And I'm kind of glad I am. I'm noticing a lot. So first and foremost, the knife that I did use for pumpkin carving. You guys gotta hate seeing this fucker. All right, so this is my Kershaw Launch 10. I basically only use this to round out corners, because if you guys know, when you're cutting a pumpkin, the inside, sometimes if you cut it at an angle, it doesn't show through as well until you get behind it and kind of round it out. Well, I went behind the cut and I was cutting around the inside, kind of like reaming out the inside so that the light showed through very well. That worked out for this. And this, I also traced some lines, as far as like, I tried to do a shaved pumpkin and that was so stupid. But I traced some lines out before I did it with that. Next, kind of like a blah. Didn't do bad, didn't do well. That is my Saville M2 backup. This knife has always confounded me. It's a lot of handle, a little blade. The blade is nice and hollow ground. In use for the pumpkin cutting, it did okay. And you can see I still got some pumpkin on there. I like sprayed these down with WD-40 and PB Blaster before, and then wiped them down before doing anything. But so it did okay, but it's not too stabby, so it's not like super good at puncture tasks and driving through. To me, it was just okay. This was solid. This wasn't my first choice, but my wife took my first choice. Therefore, I got stuck with whatever was left. Again, just an okay. This wasn't a fail, it just wasn't a win. Next. Oh yeah, I think that guy's jacked up. This is the Kizer Lancer 2. And yeah, I mean, I did try to clean this, but and like I said, WD-40 and PB Blaster and scrubbed it down. I'm going to have to do something extra with this one, because this one started really grabbing stuff. So the Lancer 2, this is an interesting knife. I freaking love this blade shape. This is that blade shape that Kizer does. That's like my favorite style of blade shape. Same as... Nope, that's the wrong knife. Nope, that's the wrong knife. Yeah. Notice the Kizer SLT. Notice that blade shape's like the exact same. This one's a little bit more pointy. Freaking love it. It's like a drop point, but sheep's foot Wharncliffe. It's just, I love it. So in use, this was nice because it's nice and long and pointy. This was my original pick after my wife took my original pick. And I really like it. What I would like more is if you took this freaking blade off and put it on a real size handle. Look at this handle. Without gripping it. This is how it sits in my hand. And I have big hands, but they're not wide. I don't have like bear paw hands. I have long fingers. And a long hand. It's long and narrow. It's not short and fat. You know what I mean? So I mean, this is how it grips. And this is me stuffing my fingers up there. Realistically, I want to kind of sit like this, and it just doesn't feel like you have full control over this knife. So I didn't really like that. I've never really liked that about this knife. It was my first fixed blade I got in a trade. Yeah, first fixed blade I got in a trade, and Steve Capali, maybe? I think so. I think it was with Steve. But so I like it, right? I do. I like it. But it's okay. But for the purposes of carving a pumpkin, it did pretty well. The blade does get very tall. So as you're carving, it's hard to do detail work without sliding through and accidentally, you're only trying to cut to here, and then you're pushing, and then you're like, all right, good, and then you like go all the way through, and you're like, son of a bitch. Problem with this one was I acknowledged that it was used for wider cuts, right? So I would take it, and I'm like, all right, with my fist, and I would get it all the way in there to get that wide cut, and then I would go to pull out. Man, this thing, like, it got stuck in there, and with this stupid little handle that's on it, it's like hard to get a grip on it. My complaint has always been with this knife handle. If you give me an extra half of an inch on this handle, oh gosh, this thing would be fantastic. I do really, really like this knife. S35VN. I mean, it's a pretty damn good knife, but that's where its pitfall was for me this time. And this is probably the most use it's seen in a long time after I got annoyed with it. All right, so last is my last fixed blade on the list. My Saville Momentum. You guys know, I think you do, this is one of my favorite fixed blades that I currently own. Along with the JJ Blade or J Blades custom that I have, this one is absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. Freaking love it. And so I got it out with the intentions of being like, I'm going to use my bad boy. So I picked, this was my first choice in hand, right? My wife, no. This was my wife's first choice, and I took hers because I was like, that's the one I got for me. And she ended up taking it back. Problem with this guy, and I'm 99% sure it's the black coating, because the blade stock isn't that thick, right? Because what did I use? I used the Lancer quite a bit, which worked out all right. I wasn't too mad about the Lancer. But look at that blade stock difference. The Lancer's much bigger, but it worked out a little bit better. So it's not the blade stock. Man, this thing was not slicing through shit. It's not dull, all right? Let's see here. Look at that. It's just taking off hairs off the arm. It is not dull by any means. It's a very sharp knife. That coating just hung up, and you're driving through like 3/4 of an inch thick pumpkin, and it's just fighting you the whole way. And my wife was using it, and she's like, this knife sucks. And then when like your wife says that, and she really doesn't even know what knives you own, you kind of take it personally. You're like, excuse you, you can get out of my house. Well, you think that, and then you take the knife and you're like, give me that knife. So I go to stab the pumpkin with it, and I'm going to carve, and it really was like, everything about it screams this is going to be good for carving, and then it's like, it's like fighting you in and out, and that sucked. I wish that wasn't the case. And it might be hollow grinds. Hollow grinds might not work for this as well because you have the small ridge as you're driving through, but this doesn't even feel that pronounced. I don't know. It sucks because this is probably one of my favorite fixed blades that I own. Yes, I know. Call me a shill. I don't give a shit. This thing's actually really cool. It's probably one of the best size for an everyday carry. I'm not talking anything crazy. I'm talking everyday carry. One of my favorites. And yeah, it didn't work for pumpkin carving, unfortunately. And my wife still lives in the house, so I guess that's where we stand. All right, on to the two kings of the pumpkin carving session. I'm going to call this one my king just because I didn't get to use my original choice. This is the steel wheel piercer. So it was kind of fun picking a knife for pumpkin carving, and it was also kind of difficult. Like I'm going through my stuff and I'm like, wait a second, this isn't going to work. And then I grabbed, say, like the Kershaw bare knuckle, right? And I'm like, all right, yeah, well, not really, because I'm going to be stabbing a lot. And no, okay. So I took that back. And then I grabbed my Bestech Bison. Great shape for it. And then I'm like, oh, coated. And I realized that with the Saville Momentum. I'm like, shit. So it was kind of difficult to kind of go through your stuff, you know? And then like you're hesitant with the folding knives anyways, because you don't want to get them all gunked up and shit. So you're leaning. Anyways, so I ended up picking the steel wheel piercer, which happened to be a really good choice because I have really good grip on it as I'm kind of like going through. And this is probably one of the only times where you can make the acceptable motion where I was just doing this over and over, right? It does get wide, but it's easy to control, so you don't have to go wide. And then what I did learn when you're carving a pumpkin, if you guys didn't know, and some of you are going to be like, yeah, I know, but you guys are also the same jackasses like me that drew your picture on the pumpkin first because you're being smart, right? And then you go and you cut out the frickin' negatives instead of the positives, or vice versa. You guys know what I'm talking about? You like drew some teeth and then you cut out the tooth instead of the mouth, and you're like, oh, fudge. Well, there goes that tooth. And then you have to get creative and chop a toothpick in half and stuff it in there. So now he's got a fake tooth that's on there. Anyways, so where was I going with that? Oh, if you have like, say, a triangle, right? Like this. I don't know if you guys can see those lines. Instead of driving through and trying to cut through this triangle the whole way, what you do is you make a point and then you take it to the other side and you follow your lines right where they intersect and you start the cut there. So you start a cut on both sides. Just a little tip for you pumpkin people out there, because that helps out a lot, especially when you're using a fat blade. Once I got the hang of that, and the ergonomics of this are really, really good. This thing worked out really well. It was the first time using it, so I was glad to get to use it too. I got this in a trade with Jake, so I've been using a lot of the steel wheels. I had a Sargus that I was going to review, and I ended up giving it away. I did with the guy that I made a trade with, who was really good to me in the trade, and so I told him I was throwing something extra in it, so he got the Sargus with it. But I've been using the cut jack and not the Texel. I don't remember what the other one is, but there's some really good steel wheel knives out there. I mean, really good. So, and this is no exception. This thing's very cool. It's niche, so it's definitely unique in that, but it's a very, very nice knife. Kind of working centric. It feels like a good work knife. All in all, really liked it. It would definitely take the number 2 slot when carving pumpkins. My number 1 pick when carving pumpkins is guess that. Oh shit! I was gonna say guess that knife. It's like if you guys ever watch Pokemon, back guess that Pokemon. This is my Bestech swordfish. This was my number 1. This is S35VN, by the way. The D2 probably would have been a little bit worse of a choice, but then again, the piercer's in D2 and it looks fine. This guy worked fantastic. This is exactly my thought process when picking a knife for carving a pumpkin. Basically a steak knife that I'm not thinking I'm ever going to break inside the pumpkin. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? You grab your steak knives, they're like these cheap, flimsy sons of bitches, or even the expensive ones. The expensive ones are worse because they're even more narrow, right? They'll slice great, but then they're like, if you go to bend, it's like, am I going to snap this son of a bitch? So this guy has a thick enough blade stock that no pumpkin will break my blade. And you really have a long, narrow blade for stabbing through. And actually, I got in a little bit of trouble with this guy, because as I would start and I would try to work on down, man, once this thing caught like a run, it was just, and it was gone. I almost chopped my freaking finger off like twice because it took off on me, and I was not expecting that. I know you're not supposed to cut towards yourself, but you weren't expecting it to cut through about 10 inches of pumpkin without telling you, you know? So yeah, this worked really good for long draws and super narrow punctures. I really enjoyed using this, but this was the knife that my wife took away from me while we were carving, because this was her favorite. And she said she liked the tuxedo. Yep. All in all, this is definitely one of the best pumpkin carving knives I've ever used. I thoroughly enjoyed using it. I need to tighten up that pivot, but it's a really, really good knife. And I was glad I got to use it because it hasn't seen enough pocket time. I was glad I got to use the steel wheel piercer too, because it was a joy to use something new. And the ergonomics of that are really, really good for the shape. It's kind of it's almost like a shaman-esque shape, right? With the larger finger cutout right there. As far as the pumpkin carving goes, oh God, I'm sorry. You need to have a spa day. As far as the pumpkin carving goes, I was at a party like a week ago where I got sick from chili, and I had my Wii Esprit on me. Well, the dad actually had this pumpkin carving thing for the kids, which was a great idea, but so badly planned. He goes down there and he was ready to manage like 7 kids carving pumpkins at a time, and these kids were like at ages from like 4 to 10. And I was like, oh shit, dude. So I went down there and I was helping him. It's like, you need a knife? And I'm like, do I need a knife? I'm sorry, no, right? So I did use this to cut open a couple pumpkins, make a few cuts with it, and out of everything that I gave you on the list, or is coming on the list, I'm not sure when I'm chopping this in, this did one of the best that I've ever used. It's so good. All right, hope this was entertaining. It's not meant to be anything too crazy informative or, whatever the case is. It's not meant to, this is just supposed to be fun, and this was a true experience. I did use all these. My wife made fun of me because I had like 15 knives on the table, and I'm like, no. And she's like, just give me a knife. And I'm like, okay. All right, guys, my name is Tyler. This has been Everyday EDC. These are the 2 best knives that I used this year for carving pumpkins. You guys stay sharp, stay safe, have a great freaking rest of your day. Thanks for watching. Hey guys, if you liked what you saw, don't forget to subscribe. Also, don't forget to hit that like button and or leave a comment. The whole reason this channel was created was to interact with you guys and just share the love of knives. So until next time, you guys stay sharp, stay safe, and have a great freaking rest of your day. Thanks for watching.